Good evening. Welcome to another episode of Mowing After Dark here on the College Football Mafia Network. I am Moen, joined tonight by my co-host Rock and Rant. How you doing, Rock and Rant? You got your mic on mute, brother? Well, Rock and Rant's he's got a new microphone, so he's going to be working on it a bit. But I'll go ahead and we'll get it started off from here. We'll say hello to some people.
I think we're good.
Yeah, okay. You got it now. Let's say hello to some people already. Popped in the chat. Ryan Willie, the Evil Badger's here. Good to see you, Ryan. Joaquin Morales is here. Says, hey, Moen and CFM fam, don't forget to smash that like button for these great shows. It's free. Thank you so much, Joaquin. And if you guys need a reminder, I know we didn't get to a lot of chat comments last night, guys. We had well over 1,000 comments by the time we got done with that show. So we're going to try and get to as many chat comments tonight as we can. So, friends call me Sean. I'll take a course of Florida State Clemson to the Big with a side of UNC UVA to the SEC and shots of Syracuse and Georgia Tech as a beverage. Then have Notre Dame Stanford as dessert with a cold glass of Knoll Udder milk.
Sounds like Sean's at the buffet bar in Vegas.
Do they even still have buffet
I am the
bars?
milkman. My milk is delicious.
I thought they got rid of them with COVID.
It came back like everything.
Dan Miter, hello everyone logged into Discord, not sure what to choose. The main chat is usually where you want to go, Dan. That's where most of the action happens, but we have some subsections there. And sometimes we have scheduled voice chats in there. And sometimes, if you're real lucky, you'll catch me in there drunk singing music. Illini Ted's in the house. Good to see you, Illini Ted. Congo is here. Hello, everyone. Good to see you, Congo. Daniel Gygax. Hi, he's back from vacation. Glad to see you, Daniel Gygax. Hope you had a good vacation. Jose is in the house. Ryan Thomas pushing his conspiracy theories again. The truth needs to be exposed. The Badgers, the University of Wisconsin, sent to space in the 60s, have mutated into a malevolent race of masterminds who are behind realignment, those evil space Badgers.
Well, I guess that's better than denying that space exists, which is another truth or thing out there. So,
yeah. Although Badgers would probably enjoy flat Earth, I think. Space Badgers especially. Sky says, are we eating ACC pie for the 4th of July? I don't think we're going to get there that quickly.
And yeah, I don't think Jim Phillips is ready to eat his humble pie yet. So I don't think we get to have the rest of it by then.
Matt, hear me out. Dallas market, Texas recruiting, ACC fallout equals SMU to the Big Ten. I heard you. I don't agree with you.
I mean, that said, their alumni are basically donating more to the athletic department than Nebraska is doing in research, so anything's possible.
Right. Oh, absolutely. It's just they'd have to get on the field to win. They'd have to do so many stadium upgrades. Are they? I don't even know if they're AAU or not.
I do not know that answer, actually. Maybe somebody in the chat can look it up for us and tell us if SMU is AAU, because I actually don't know.
Illini Ted says, Revenge of the Nerds reference, Jim Phillips, that's my pie. Thank you. We're not doing Caddyshack references tonight.
It's a good one, though. I love that movie.
Yeah. Expedition Greg, hey, everyone. Good to see you, Greg. Laura Weiss, hey, y'all. Good to see you, Laura. Keith from Spring Hill, go Knowles, FSU Clemson to the Big Ten, and Miami sent to the MAC where they can finally compete for a conference title again. I don't know. Maction's hard to keep up with.
You know, the mental health services are available pretty well in this country at this point. So,
West Virginia Earl, hey everyone, good to see you, West Virginia Earl. Expedition Greg, OH, IO. Almighty Finn's in the house.
AKA back from the dead.
Yeah. Mr. Monkey says is here. Mafia Boss Talk, that's going to be on our members only stream the sit down coming up. Almany Finn. We'll get to some of these. Just want to make sure I didn't miss anybody. Coy's in the house. Dallas Marquez is in the house. Keep Choppin's in the house. Our buddy Immaculate's in the house. The eyeball emote. What are you drinking there? Vodka again?
Just a little bit of something covered by something else.
Oh, okay.
No endorsements until we get an NIL deal for the
Okay.
channel.
Yeah, it's going to be hard to get a liquor endorsement, but we'll see. All right, let's get right down to it. I think we've got everybody. I think Movie Time Blues coming in late here. Good to see you, Movie Time Blues. And I don't know if we got to Sky yet, so I will say hello to Sky as well. So let's get down to it. We talked last night about my theory on how the ACC controlled demolition is going to happen, the controlled implosion. I know Greg, our special guest last night, if you didn't catch last night's stream, it was a pop-up stream. We had Greg on. We talked a little bit about what Josh Pate's statement meant. I personally believe that ESPN is going to announce before the beginning of the season they're not picking up the ACC. Greg has some different ideas. He believes the SEC. He's got tinglies that the SEC is going to eat first, second, third, and fourth. What do you think about it, Rock and Ram?
Well, and just for everyone, on the cause of us going later, we thought, let's give ourselves a chance to see if our friend Josh Pate, who's the cause of much of the conjecture, happened to say anything during the opening part of his show, which I watched like the first 45 minutes and didn't see anything other than him referencing the podcast where he went into more detail about his tweet earlier this week with the Jurassic Park water GIF emoji. It was weird because I heard some things just on the Miami side of like Domino's things happening a few days before, right around the same time he said that. I don't know if it has anything to do with that. I don't know if it's just, random speculation, but it was definitely an interesting week. The ESPN thing that you're talking about makes a lot of sense to me. If they are really taking that active hand, it sort of moves that ultimate deadline a lot more forward, and it could just be a symptom of everybody just wants to stop talking about realignment and just do, the whole old adage of whatever must be done eventually should just be done now kind of thing. And that would make sense in that case. I don't really think that the Josh Pate tweet, your theory and Greg's speculation are necessarily contradictory. I can see a timeline where those all are actually together in one place, and that it actually happens. And then all the smoke about the SEC not wanting to do anything is just the typical Sankey smoke.
All right, we got our first super chat of the evening. If you guys want to leave a super chat, we guarantee all super chats get read. If you want to become a member, gift a membership, just go down to the little cash icon in the chat window. You can do all that good stuff from there. And I won't talk about it for another hour at least. So, Ryan Thomas, the SEC will make a run at Florida State and Clemson because of ESPN.
I mean, just like Greg threw people off earlier this week, or was it last week? They all start to blend together, the FSU fans, about taking all the odds down off the board at the Big Ten. Was going to go after Notre Dame and North Carolina, which I've argued is what he said all along, that they would go to those two schools first. I think the same thing holds true to what Ryan's saying, that when this all comes down, I'm quite certain that SEC via their partners at ESPN are going to want to try to keep two of their most valuable properties in the ACC in-house. So that's almost like the corollary of they will try to do that as well, especially if the SEC is more willing to go to 20, because then it's easy for them to have the two things that they also say that they want potentially in UNC and maybe Virginia if Notre Dame is completely out of the question, and still make ESPN happy with the draw on the football side.
Thank you for the super chat, Ryan. It's much appreciated, sir. I'll give you a Keith Jackson for that one.
We're gonna play football. Yippee!
This brings us to a greater point. What if the SEC does grab Florida State, Clemson, North Carolina, and Virginia? How does the Big Ten respond?
Well, I'm doing a jig because Miami's definitely going to the Big Ten then.
Okay.
Right. Like, not that I don't think it's possible. And then it gets interesting. It depends upon what they think Notre Dame is or isn't going to do. Right. And anyone could work around any weird odd numbers of schools. So whoever, if that scenario were to play out and we're doing a what if, everyone, we're not making, predictions based off of insider information or anything like that. We're just having the fun water cooler talk. If they were to do that, maybe it depends upon whether like Immaculate's view of this ACC public private university Ivy League that's a little bit more Ivy in the athletic side and not just on the academic sides comes together. It depends. Are they leaning more towards a market play if, for instance, Notre Dame doesn't want to come? Like, does that really make Georgia Tech a viable candidate on a broader sense of trying to get, that regional market, even if Georgia Tech might be the third or fourth most watched team in that market and they're making an investment for the future? It's hard to kind of picture what would happen if those four schools go off and Notre Dame's not available because they still decide to leave, other than I feel even more confident that Miami would be the one. Georgia Tech, strangely enough, is the one that seems to be the one that would raise up in that scenario where Notre Dame says no, at least for now, and the other four go, unless the Big Ten thinks that Notre Dame's going to say yes in 5 years, and they just start filling with those spots with who they think Notre Dame wants in a controlled demolition.
Mm-hmm.
What about yourself? What do you think on that one?
I believe Miami and Georgia Tech strongly. If the SEC does get all four of those teams, you need to get into the Southeast. You need to get into Florida. You want to get into Georgia. You get Georgia Tech and Miami. Now that leaves you with an East Coast division of 5 teams: Penn State, Maryland, Rutgers, Miami, Georgia Tech. If you can add Notre Dame, you can put Notre Dame into that East Coast pod. Even though they're in Indiana, they have more rivals because they play games consistently with Georgia Tech, with Miami, the previous stuff with Miami, with Penn State back in the independent days. So I think they fit there. Then I think you would go West Coast and add Stanford and Cal, because I think Notre Dame would want Stanford and Stanford would want Cal. So your West Coast division would be Oregon, Washington, Stanford, California, UCLA, USC. And then your middle division, you're going to have to make a decision whether or not you want to take Kansas or wait and see if you can poach Texas A&M.
And maybe I'm just doing the math poorly in my head, but then who's the 6th school in that theory? If it's Georgia Tech, Miami, Notre Dame potentially,
Stanford, Cal. It's either going to be Kansas or Texas A&M. I'm saying if you can wait for Texas A&M, you wait for Texas A&M. But I completely understand if you can't wait for Texas A&M. Another super chat from Ryan. ESPN executives will be paying North Carolina Board of Governors a visit. They may have already done that. They may have already taken them out to dinner at some nice steakhouse in North Carolina. So thank you again for the super chat, Ryan. It's much appreciated, sir. Helps us keep the lights on. Do you think ESPN's already made that call, or do you think that they're getting ready with a bundle of roses?
Look, I think back channel conversations are always going on right now, and and they're playing all sides because they don't know how it's ultimately going to play out unless this whole Josh Pate thing and other speculation, Greg taking everything off the boards, is all tied into that. Those conversations are happening more directly than anyone knows at the moment. But you don't need to talk to the entire board to get the message through. Conference. Greg Sankey doesn't say what he needs to say on Paul Feinbaum publicly, right? Necessarily. He sometimes says it to Paul Feinbaum or fill in the blank for other reporters that tend to get the SEC scoops, and it's probably coming from Sankey or somebody else that Sankey is deemed to put something out strategically.
Right. Keep chopping. Breaking news. Rutgers flips highly coveted 4-star linebacker from Penn State, continues to surge inside the top 10 in recruiting. Absolutely. I said it earlier this year. Don't sleep on Rutgers. Don't sleep on Greg Schiano. He's an excellent coach. Any thoughts on Rutgers? I know you're a Jets fan. What do you?
No, strangely, I have let's say a long time ago, there was a personal connection via my sister when it came to Rutgers as a player. And so I followed, and I knew Shiano obviously as a Miami coach and was praying for him not to actually be the Miami coach, even though I think he's a good coach. I just didn't think he was the good coach that Miami specifically needed. Look, I mean, rankings in the recruiting rankings are great, and it's better to be in the top 10 now than not be in the top 10 especially if you're an up and coming in terms of recruiting like Rutgers is trying to do. It just changes so much now with NIL towards the end of the season that it's, if you can hold on and finish for the top 10 or even a top 20 class, if you're Rutgers in the Big Ten with everything that's going on NIL, that's a massive win for the program.
Laura Weiser, high school stadiums in Texas as nice as SMU's. Yeah, I think it was, I believe it was Immaculate. If you follow Immaculate on Twitter at Immaculate View, he posted the footage of that Texas high school stadium. I think it holds 30,000 something people. It's insane. It's a full $100+ million stadium. So definitely go check that out.
But SMU can fix that. If any school has, besides like a Stanford who has a ridiculous endowment and those alums, like they're one of the ones that have shown that they will spend the money to do whatever they need to do to get back to the top, and maybe they're just waiting for the right moment or two to assess that. And they might have to wait a little bit longer to figure out whether the ACC is the saving grace that they thought it was going to be, or whether they're left out in the cold again.
Mr. Monkey says SMU doesn't have fans, but they have paid a few thousand people to pretend to be SMU fans. Well, that works too. Movie Time Blues, with the massive egos of the four-letter and Sankey, they're capable of anything. Great point.
No argument there.
Let's see here. Brett Taylor says ACC will implode. ESPN and Fox will determine who goes to Big and SEC. Then Big 12 will pick and choose among the leftovers.
Sometimes leftovers are really good, though.
That's true. Sometimes you get good leftovers.
Day after Thanksgiving, you can still eat.
Chef Mal, it's going to be funny when the FSU to Big deals with the reality that FSU is going to the SEC and Miami will be big. Said that in big letters.
That he said that in big letters. It will be funny. It won't be that funny to me if somehow that also means that the rivalry doesn't go on in whatever form as a out of conference game. So I might chuckle for a second, but only if I know that there's a game being scheduled if that scenario happens. Which could be easier to do if they're if FSU goes to the SEC and then Florida just becomes an automatic annual game in conference.
Expedition Greg counters that FSU is big bound. I know a lot of people think that.
I hope they are, actually. Clemson, if they go to SEC, fine with. Both of those schools are going to land somewhere good either way.
Let's scroll down. We got another super chat here from Ryan Thomas. Who is the cold pizza for the Big 12? My choices would be Louisville, Virginia Tech, Pitt, and North Carolina State. The scenario where the SEC eats 4 teams.
Yeah, Virginia Tech to me is like the cold pizza that nobody's thinking about, because I know some of Utes analysis shows that they're sort of a weird data candidate, but the smell test with them is that if they are up on the rise again, which I actually think that they are, that the value around that program and the traditions they have there are could really turn them into one of the top 3 schools in that conference on an ongoing basis. They've had some bad, I personally know what bad coaching hires do to a program, as well as bad administration decisions. And Virginia Tech has suffered through some of that, but I think they're going to come back and turn it around.
Illini Ted, Greg must think ESPN trumps the SEC once because I don't think they want all 4 teams. I don't think they want all 4 either. I think it's a scenario where it's like the Wolf of Wall Street, where his cousin grew up hot. They don't want to, but they don't want to let anybody else have them either.
Right. Absolutely. And they have, at some level, there's an SEC ESPN relationship that has to be mitigated too, right?
Absolutely. Brian Thomas, no guarantees FSU bites, but ESPN We'll make them an offer that will be hard to refuse.
Lots of people kiss and make up, right? Even after they've had really bad fights, some people get divorced and get married again.
Chad Bracey, whatever ends up happening, I'm just ready to know how it all plays out, good or bad. It's the waiting that sucks. I hear you. It's draining, and we do it for, a hobby and a little bit of money, and we're getting drained of it too. We're ready for football to start. So 9 Saturdays, guys, 9 more Saturdays.
Yeah. It's the thing we love to hate and hate that we love, because we're all here, right? Like, it makes the offseason go better than just talking about NIL. So something's going to fill that gap. Maybe, in the future, it'll be the third year of the offseason UFL version of, EA College Football 2025, where we're just playing incessantly to fill the gap of the long break between seasons.
Yeah, that comes out, how many? July 8th, I think?
Yeah, it's like whatever, 15 more sleeps or something.
Yeah, there you go. I'm going to set my clock to New Zealand time on my Xbox. That way I can play it early. Ryan Thomas again. Sankey isn't God and will do exactly what ESPN says.
I think he's got a little bit more power than that. It's not as much of a dictatorship as people think, but clearly ESPN has a lot of influence in those conversations.
Sky says big ads, Miami and Georgia Tech. Congo says agreed with ESPN going to eat first, maybe with UNC, UVA, NC State, and Clemson. Florida State, Notre Dame, maybe Miami will not agree with ESPN. They will be with the big. That's another good combination.
I mean, that's a stellar combination if it comes together. You basically, in that zone, assuming the schools play up to their potential, have a much more balanced zone of top tier teams balancing out bottom tier than right now probably exists between the Big Ten and the SEC, though you obviously have to take into account what's going to happen with the new schools coming into both conferences and what shakes out from there.
Illini Ted says, I think if the SEC gets all 4 of those and puts a blow to the ACC, I think the big goes to Notre Dame and says, okay, what does it take now that you lost your perfect independent setup? I hope so.
I mean, Moen, is there any, I know generally what you say, but is there any scenario where the Big Ten would do a scheduling agreement that they felt like they had no choice other than to keep them away from the SEC for their one out of conference game against 5 of their SEC schools?
No, go for it. Notre Dame wouldn't want to play 5 SEC schools. They would feel too good. They'd feel too good about themselves to do something like that. They would get more freedom in the Big Ten as a partner. Just my opinion, and I will have a Moen rant coming out about it. I just didn't do it today because my voice is shot. Doing 3.5 hours on Friday and then 2 hours last night. It was pretty shot. But yeah, I'm not real happy with Notre Dame at the moment.
Are you ever happy with Notre Dame?
No, when they bend the knee, I'll be happy. Daniel Gygax, can Notre Dame leave their NBC contract without a penalty? But NBC does have the primetime big game. Yeah, they can leave. I'm sure there might be a small penalty, but NBC would be ecstatic to have them in the Big Ten.
Yeah, and since we don't know what that contract looks like, I can't imagine there aren't some contingencies based in, that contract was being negotiated. If you, in hindsight, it's not like the whole Big Ten deal was done in a vacuum, or the app, or any of those things that are out there that people in some degree of conversations when the NBC Notre Dame re-up was finalized didn't have an idea of what could happen during the term of this deal.
Friends call me Sean. Either Florida State has ESPN's full disclosure by the short hairs, or they don't. If they do, then they won't be dictated to and go to the big. Florida State has eyes on AAU research money and more academic prestige.
Very possible. My guess is that FSU, regardless of not having the full agreement in front of them, has a strong idea of what's going on. They just don't have the full copy to really nail down every point and be able to have other people who with smart minds look at the ways to go through it. But they have a pretty good idea. Now, whether a judge agrees with their interpretation of the core and leaving the conference, or how the deal is fully worded, so they can pull it all together. That I guess we're going to find out. But we'll also know what they really think of it if they do the bold statement that people think they're going to do and potentially make some announcement before August 15th rolls around.
Hearing you talk about Georgia Tech is laughable. Well, I mean, if the SEC grabs UNC, UVA, Florida State, and Clemson, and the Big still wants to get into the Southeast, how do they do that? Give me another candidate. Because the only three candidates I could see available would be Florida or Miami, Georgia Tech, and Duke.
I mean, they could go to Virginia Tech, but I just don't know whether they're going to do that. Because if there's 4 or 5 factors available, right, from your actual, your actual academics, your actual viewership trends, your actual market penetration, access to that market, carriage fees, and if you're not bringing something like that, who knows? But I guess from the Big Ten's perspective, if you don't get Virginia, then you do get, for whatever length of time it matters, bringing Virginia Tech in would potentially get you some more stuff if Maryland hasn't already done that for most of Virginia.
Yeah, I think that's a problem for Virginia Tech, that Maryland's already done that. With the UVA ad, I think if the Big Ten added them, it would just be a prestige move, purely prestige. So, I'm going to say this. Name me another candidate, because I can only think of 3. Miami, Georgia Tech, and Duke. That would fit within the Big Ten's cultural fits, academics, that sort of thing. Dan Miter says not too much to celebrate on the 4th for the ACC.
I mean, I would cry, except for I don't care. Let them die.
Would Notre Dame push for Pitt to join them as one of the backpacks to the Big? I know there is a lot of history there. Pittsburgh's a fantastic school, AAU, great research university, but it has the problem of existing in Pennsylvania, and Penn State will do everything they can to block that addition. So Notre Dame's probably going to get to add a couple teams. I think Stanford and Cal will be 2 of the, I think that might be their as much as they can get.
Yeah, when you have to think about Pitt in terms of like a Stanford competition or a Cal, right?
Yeah.
And what are the pluses or minuses overall for that?
Keep Chopping says top 20-25 will be fine for Rutgers. They seem to actually have some decent NIL cash. Not Lambeau cash, but still cold hard cash. Well, they're in Jersey, so get a Cadillac. That's better than a Lambeau in Jersey.
Go dig around the Pine Barrens. There might be some extra money left from something.
If Fox were to offer FSU less than full share, ESPN waiving their Gore fee becomes more enticing. Also waiting on Notre Dame is just big shooting themselves in the foot. Yeah,
I don't see Fox. Everyone likes to say that, I think we're hearing more lately, people proclaiming that maybe FSU would only get a half share from Fox and from the Big Ten, whether it's because of what happened with Oregon or Washington, or a perception that they don't have any other competition for them. I don't really know that that's baked into the equation to the same degree. You can always fix, if you wanted to, backwards and change things and the parameters as new situations evolve. Like the one thing that's definitely not ironclad is that you can amend your own contracts with willing partners.
Sky says Fox offered Washington and Oregon partial shares because those schools had no other options. Rutgers, Maryland, Nebraska, they had no other options at the time. USC and UCLA had options. They also brought the 3rd largest market in America, or one of the top 3. I think it's number 2? Or is it number
2?
1? Number 2.
Number 2,
okay.
Technically.
Yeah. So yeah, you bring a number 2 market and lock it down like that. I mean, they earned their full shares. They brought legitimately a huge market into the footprint. So, Immaculate, Anthony Carlson, true. If Texas A&M were ever to join the Big Ten, they would probably have a special clause in their contract that keeps them from having to play Friday games. I know Ohio State hates it. We hate playing Friday games.
I don't know that anyone that generally gets TV coverage likes Friday night games. Miami sometimes gets them, and when you already have the attendance issues you have, trying to get to that stadium for people who are living in Miami at 5 or 6 o'clock on a Friday is hellacious. And there's probably a lot of other markets that are not, as small as some of the rural places where some of the bigger state schools are, that also applies. But, the schools that don't get that coverage, it's still kind of a good thing. And everyone needs to take one for their team and their conference now and then.
Jason James says Texas A&M is not happening. Guaranteed. If you'd asked me 2 years and a month ago, I'd have probably told you yes. But that was before USC and UCLA joined, which I would also said it's never going to happen, guaranteed. So realignment makes strange bedfellows. The architect says, fellas, I'm crushed over the thought of FSU going to the SEC. With that, them Canes all day.
I don't. If you're worrying about being caught between the SEC and the Big Ten, you're in a good spot either way, right? You'll get over the grief. You will learn to live with your feelings about the 2023 playoff. I've almost learned to live with my feelings about the 2020 BCS rank, the 2000 BCS rankings, and the 2001 penalty flag. Almost. So you'll almost learn to live with either choice too.
Matt says, any chance North Carolina State and Virginia Tech go SEC? If Wolfpack backpack holds, Virginia Tech I don't think has backpack. I think the Attorney General in Virginia would sever that in a heartbeat.
I mean, Virginia has stood up for Virginia Tech before. I just don't know that Virginia, as the child wearing the backpack, has the strength that UNC as the backpack wearer has for NC State.
Don in Kansas says the Big 12 comes out of the next round of realignment with at least one new member. That will be a big surprise. I think so too. I call it Syracuse.
Don, who do you think it is?
I think it's Syracuse. Yeah.
For Don. I don't know why delusionally, I still think that Connecticut could wind up being the surprise one from a basketball perspective, especially now that Hurley stayed. That thing isn't necessarily dead. If we've been hearing stuff that people think basketball is undervalued. Maybe delusion hits there. It's not going to be for their football program, clearly.
Michael Smith says Virginia Tech 4 ACC championships this century. Unfortunately, that doesn't mean much for conference realignment.
Yeah, the issue for Virginia Tech is, and I feel it from a being down perspective, but the baseline TV ratings just haven't been great, even relative to others that have underperformed. If you just go back and look at Utes things, so I personally would love Virginia Tech to be going to one of the premier conferences. I as a Miami fan, I consider them to be an actual rival versus half the ACC. It just doesn't matter. Virginia Tech has always been a great team to play. It's a great school to go visit and see a game if you have a chance to.
Morris Simmons, ESPN do not own Florida State. I don't think we're saying that they do. I'm just saying that ESPN, the Big Ten might say, we don't want to fight this fight. We'll take Notre Dame and be happy if you just give us A, B, and C. This thing could happen. It's a lot. We kind of joke around. We're the college football mafia, but a lot of these things seem like a lot more often that they are almost mafia-esque.
It is. It's like more. It's like it's the four families now.
Yeah.
Not the P5. One of them got wiped out.
It's the three families, and they're talking about how to whack up the fourth family.
Yeah, they're trying to make them the affiliates from Kansas who came in for the big meeting.
Yep. They'll say, well, you're getting the gambling, you're getting the vice, you get the drugs. Immaculate got to run. Thanks for stopping by. Go watch House of Dragons. I know that's why you're being summoned. Ryan Thomas says, no, Sankey doesn't have more power than ESPN. They can crack him like a clam.
I don't think anyone said he has more power than them. I think, at least I know, I was saying that they don't have ESPN does not have all the power. It's like literally not how it works. They have a ton of power, but that's just not how those negotiations happen.
Right. Chad Bracey says, how many times can the ACC appeal every move in court before we actually get to a case?
Many?
Yeah, years.
Years?
Billable hours remains undefeated, guys.
You know, whether it's these specific scenarios or fill in the blank trial of interest for you, whoever and whatever topic that might be, there's many ways of doing it because you can appeal a specific ruling and something else that otherwise is fine. Both schools right now, if you think about it, FSU and the ACC are specifically appealing every single thing that gets decided in their respective states. So in their own right, they're both dragging them out, hoping that their state still moves faster and still hoping that they do get some degree of home cooking. I think Florida State's home cooking is going to be more important than the ACC's home cooking when it's all said and done.
Yeah, I think so too, because Florida State has two schools that Florida has two schools that could potentially leave and be freed by the same judge's decision. In the state of South Carolina, it's only Clemson. North Carolina, you've got 4 schools. So could be interesting. Keep Chopping says whatever it takes to get Notre Dame to bend the knee. And then he comes back with Notre Dame needs to be the new Purdue in the Big Ten.
That's the thing that is amazing, though, right, about all of this is we talk about, well, schools don't need, conferences don't need more than one school in a state. But except for if it's Indiana and it's Notre Dame, then it's 3 is totally cool. Granted, Notre Dame is a national audience, international, really, if you're being fair about it with, their alumni base and just the connections as like a Catholic university have. But yeah, you'd have 3 schools in Indiana when it's all said and done.
Coy, I gotta admit, Oregon just posted a new video of their new basketball court, and it looks nice, especially with the green big logo on it. If that's the court with the pine trees on it, I hate it. I hate it. I've seen several games on it, and I hate it. You've seen that court before with the pine trees on it?
Not offhand. I did see Becky posted the Washington version of what Coy's talking about for Oregon, and that looked pretty cool.
Yeah, I don't like that basketball court. Congo says Sankey and ESPN remind him of Jim Delaney and ESPN. Both started off great till ESPN lowballed everyone. Nothing comes good with ESPN.
Well, people take the check over and over again. So, including all of college football for the playoff.
Matt says Florida State, Miami, Duke, Rutgers, Maryland, Notre Dame to the East Coast, Calford to complete West Coast, split the other 12 into 2.
That seems so much less exciting when you list it that way.
Let's start a poll. Florida State. I want to see where the audience is at on this. Is it an even split? Florida State, bigger SEC. Where do you think they're going to land? Not where you want them to land, where you think they're going to land. Let us know. Michael Smith says Notre Dame already knows this and is probably talking to the other conferences on the down low to gain maximum leverage before any Big Ten talks.
Yeah, look, I mean, they are always getting asked, right? And any single time conference stuff is coming up, contracts are coming up. It's not like their Notre Dame administration and the Big Ten don't know where each other are, or they're not having interaction. I mean, they have it from the one sport that Notre Dame is ingrained with the Big Ten on. I think it's hockey, right? And they play in those schools. So those conversations are happening all the time. I'm sure the Big Ten has a pretty good idea where Notre Dame stands, and the minute it starts to change, I'm sure they also know.
Almighty Finn says there's no such thing as bad blood when you're dealing in business, especially when dealing with hundreds of millions of dollars. FSU to SEC, you're talking billions of dollars. And you're right.
Yeah, I guess
there is no bad blood in business.
Yeah, like I think if you're talking marginal amount of money, then peace of mind. If you get offered a job and you love the place that you're at, and somebody else offers you a 5% raise, you may or may not make that decision depending upon your circumstances. But if you love the place you are and somebody that you're not so sure about offers you a 30, 40, 50% bump, you're probably making a decision. Even if it's going back to a company you weren't before, you might make that decision. Like, not everyone would. Some people are fortunate to not have to make those decisions. But right now, even the well-off here are trying to make the best financial decisions for them, knowing what the competitive landscape is looking like.
Tracy, FSU, Notre Dame, and Georgia Tech had a great rivalry once upon a time. I still think they do. My father is a Georgia Tech grad, and we couldn't say that name in the house. Your father is a good man.
That's one of those rivalries that I know happened, but I wouldn't, I don't have the sense from afar about the fierceness of it or the passion for keeping it going, or at least ongoing.
Right. It's not on the level of a USC Notre Dame, but it's, on a similar level to Pitt Notre Dame, I would say. I cannot pronounce that name, brother. ESPN lets Florida State go to the Big in exchange for one game a week on Fridays.
I'm trying to think that through. I mean, they're still losing a boatload of audience in that deal, unless they're just horse trading and thinking of their overall partnership with the new app that all these guys are combining on. That's going to be launching. Was it next year or this year? I can't even remember anymore.
Yeah, I think it's at the end of this year. Venue. Keep chopping. FSU fans will never forget what SEC and the ESPN did to them, as well they shouldn't. But the brass just sees dollar signs.
And that's a fair assessment. No one's going to forget, but think of it if you're 5 years from now and it turns out you made the wrong decision and you're $30 to $40 million behind somebody all the time. That probably isn't playing out for the Big Ten versus SEC. So it may just be trying to find the great balance of fit and lack of hatred, because the dollars are relatively close. But that's what they're trying to think of, is where they're going to be in 10 years, not how pissed they were in 2023.
Okay. Let's see. We got 58 votes in the poll. I'll let that poll run for another minute. It looks like Big is running away with it, but I'll give it another minute. If anybody hasn't voted, make sure you vote in that poll. Let us know what you think. This is your guys' show, so just keep those comments coming. We'll keep running through them as best we can.
Don't forget, if you get a chance, there's 160 something people in here. We've got about 53 likes. If you could take a quick second and hit the like button, get the more people into the chat. Maybe someone have a hot take that we're not aware of. And if you haven't subscribed and weren't part of getting to the 4,000, you can be part of getting us to the 5,000. And yes, those little actions really help all the channels of the people that you guys participate with and follow more than you know.
And if you're watching on demand and you hate our takes, give us shit in the comments. We don't mind. We will gladly take the shit. You can take the piss out of us. We don't mind. Is Florida, this is from Almighty Finn, is Florida State Clemson doing ESPN dirty work by making problems for the ACC? That way the ACC doesn't have to renew the ACC. I think he means ESPN doesn't have to renew the ACC look-in. We talked about this a little last night. We need to know for sure what it is. Is it a look-in or is it an extension? Because according to Clemson and Florida State, it's an extension. According to Jim Phillips, it's just a look-in.
I think it doesn't matter. Like, if somebody shoots you or stabs you, you're either way, you're dead, right? Like, it doesn't matter which version of how they're looking at it. If they can look in and decide this wasn't a really good marriage, we should just separate our separate ways, or they can be like, this is junk, we're opting out. It's the same thing. If they're overperforming, then I guess the optimism side that maybe Jim Phillips is stating is, I don't know if he means that, sure, they could boot us away, or they could exit the deal but be willing to negotiate a new deal with us at lesser terms, or they could look at us and we could all realize the deal is not valued properly, and for some unknown reason it's going to go up. Maybe that's the optimism of the look-in versus the opt-out. To me, they're just like different sides of the same coin.
Morris Simmons says Florida State to the big period. And with that, I will end the poll. And the poll finished 70% of people think that Florida State ends up as a Big Ten school. 30% believe they become an SEC school. So
Did you guys do a poll last night or on the same thing? Or no?
I don't remember.
I was wondering if it matches if you did one.
But we can actually, I want to do another poll about Clemson. Let's see if they think Clemson is quite on the same par with Florida State in terms of where they end up. So, Clemson Tigers, do they go to the Big Ten or do they go to the SEC, guys? Let us know what you think. Not where you want them to go, where you think they end up landing. Keep Chopping says, I'm excited for Friday night games, but it fits the Rutgers market, not so much for schools like Michigan and Penn State. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, there may be some schools that decide that they love those games, right? And they, volunteer for more of those kind of games.
It puts you out there, puts you in front of a primetime audience Friday night at 8 p.m. Why not? I mean, if you're going to be buried on the Big Ten network otherwise, I mean, might as well get that game out there, help your recruiting, help your profile. If Pac-2 rebuilds with the 6 best Mountain West schools and or the 4 best AAC schools, are they better than an ACC that loses 8 schools? It would be dependent on what schools the ACC loses, but I think you would still have to give the edge to the ACC there.
Yeah, because you can make an argument that if they lose 8 schools and they're still in existence, that some of the ones that they're going to be pulling in are likely to be at least close to the range of the schools that might come over from the Mountain West. Not all of them. There'll be some schools that in Mountain West could come over that are higher value brands in the eyes of the TV networks, not me as a person or a fan. But Memphis and Tulane as examples, there are schools that could be coming from the Mountain West that are on par to them or potentially a little bit less than that in terms of eyeballs or potential.
Yeah, I think if they did that, they would end up being, the ACC might actually end up gobbling up Oregon State and Washington State. I think that would be the best bet for those 2 schools if that happened. Then they could put in some filler, Tulane, a Rice, a Memphis, some AAC school, maybe a Colorado State, build an all-coast conference.
Do you read anything into, Moen, the fact that we really haven't heard much conversation at all about Washington State and Oregon State being in at least the radar for ACC now, since they got abandoned before Florida State and Clemson put their lawsuits out. And then recently we haven't really heard much about that at all. Do you think that signifies anything?
I mentioned this last night. I think the fact that now they're talking about forming this new conference tells me that they don't think there's a lot of hope for the ACC. We shall see, though. Jose, Georgia Tech, Miami, that's all that's left if FCC eats first through fourth. Or Duke. Duke is still there, too, but, I mean, there's not a lot of great candidates in the Southeast. If the Big Ten has to get into the Southeast, they have to take Miami. They have to take Georgia Tech.
Yeah. I mean, you can make an argument. The SEC and Big Ten both want Virginia for specific kind of reason, right? And it has really nothing to do with their football or basketball prowess. It has to do with other reasons. From a Big Ten perspective, Duke does better on football and basketball and could bring you North Carolina just as well as North Carolina could for the carriage fees. So, I think that there's a different value there for a Duke. And obviously, academically, it fits right in, especially if, Notre Dame joins or Stanford and Cal come along too.
Let's end this poll. People overwhelmingly picked Clemson to go to the SEC, 79% to 20%. Overwhelmingly, they believe Clemson. They believe Clemson's an SEC team, but they believe Florida State is a Big Ten team. So if that's the case, Miami travel partner?
Yeah, unless the doomsday scenario from a Miami fan perspective happens and it's Notre Dame and Florida State and they're only going to 20 for some reason.
which I don't think would happen because I think Notre Dame would insist on Stanford. Joseph Kurligan Jr. says, I hope the Big Ten gets Florida State, Miami, and North Carolina, and Notre Dame. That's a good lineup.
That is.
That's almost a murderer's row lineup right there.
It's a 3/4 of awesome. I mean, the perfect scenario to me is like a pure football perspective, which is what got us all into all of this, is that you're substituting Clemson for North Carolina there. But, I'm not going against the crowd sense that SEC seems more likely, assuming that everyone's basically calling bluffs and putting out some things that they want out there into the ether, because all the reporting is that they don't want another school in South Carolina. I don't really believe any of that. I think there's agendas all over the place, and I don't mean conspiracy. It's just that if you're smart, if you're a school that you feel threatened, you're going to put it out to reporters. Oh, we don't really want them there. It may or may not be coming from the commissioner, but it could be coming from really good sources, right?
All right. Ryan Willie has been a member for 6 months. Personally, I just hope the ACC drama ends soon. Thank you for being a member for 6 months, Ryan, and your continued generosity to the channel. You are an evil badger.
Very evil badger.
Yes. Downright demonic. Keep chopping. Other SEC fans will be brutal towards Florida State if they join. Could lead to some interesting football, though. It could. There's some natural rivalries there.
Look, whatever way that happens for Florida State, there's some awesome rivalry matchups, right? There's probably a little bit more just that you think implied from the SEC. Florida State has played historically more SEC schools than they've played Big Ten. Whether those are rivalries or just happen to be games and home and away series, repeatedly over time, but there's more natural affinity. And if you're a fan, it's a lot cheaper to go on road trips for sure. But most fans are not necessarily just in Tallahassee, right? So they're coming from other parts of Florida or other parts of the country, period.
Yeah, I know they're not fans of the SEC at the moment, especially after getting screwed out of the playoff spot, but you have to admit it might be a little sweet justice to get in the SEC and run a train on an Alabama or a Texas or a Georgia, get some revenge on Georgia for that beat down in the bowl game.
Yeah, absolutely. It might be brutal for one's ego at the moment, but the sort of justice served model could be pretty friggin' sweet.
Friends call me Sean says if Florida State joins the big, hope Miami gets there too. Would hate to play 9 or 10 big conference games, then have to play both Miami and Florida out of conference games. Brutal.
Well, that's my fear, Sean. Is I know that there are some within the Noles Nation there that would, in that scenario, would be more than happy to drop Miami. And I mean, I personally don't get why anyone would want to do that, even if you're pissed at Miami for votes or whatever. Just those two brands are so intertwined into what got either of them in the position to be in this conversation today. Historically, that would be one, selfishly, but I think just generally for college football fans, that would be a bad rivalry to lose out of something like this.
Coy clarifies that the Oregon court is getting rid of the trees. So no trees. Lana Ted confirms that Oregon got rid of the tree court. Rumor is the Big said it needed to go. It was so hard to watch basketball on that court. I hated it. I'm not a big basketball guy, but you scream, go by a game you want to watch and see what's happening, and you can't tell what's happening because of them damn trees.
You know what? Because I've been casually watching in a way that I haven't for like a lot of other people. WNBA has some cool court designs, actually. So, if you get a chance to look at them, there's some interesting ones that you're like, wow, that would be awesome if that was for the NBA team in that city.
Yeah, I'm a big fan. Bring back parquet courts. Shonsky says, how long do you see these lawsuits lasting? My buddy was in a lawsuit for 11 years. Cheers to your buddy. That's
wow.
That's terrible. But yeah, lawsuits can take a long time. Like I said, billable hours remains undefeated. These lawyers aren't looking necessarily for a settlement right off the bat. They're looking to stretch this out. When it gets a continuance or a change, they're happier than pigs and shit.
Yeah, I don't know. you're not going to see anything that long, right? Because that exceeds the longest length of the ACC worst case scenario contract, or just about. Like, you would know that the contract wasn't getting renewed at that point. Even if everyone was stuck because there was a gazillion-dollar buyout that you just couldn't escape, even Florida State with 14 billion people worth of private equity coming in. So it's not going to last that long. And the one thing that's different here is no matter what speculation is or isn't, there'll at least be some defining event that happens on the ACC side. ESPN is either going to look in and say yes, look in and say no, opt in and say get the hell out of here, opt out and say get the hell out of here, or opt out and say yes, we'll negotiate a lower deal by February 1st of next year. So there's the worst case is that will happen. That is completely separate and apart from the lawsuits being delayed, pursued. Attorney General in Florida does get the deal. Clemson doesn't get it. Whatever is going to happen, you at least have that. And then most of the other contracts are all up within 5 years, right? It's just really the ACC. Though granted, that's where the lawsuits are going. But even if it's played out for 4 years, let's just say that happened. Dramatic situation, horrible for Florida State, Clemson, and anybody else who'd like to get out. At that point, you actually have like a smaller bill to pay, and you're not obligated past 2036 anyway. So you're only having to mitigate something else. So worst case, I'd say 2029, because you would probably just like abandon the suit.
Yeah. Notre Dame will be in a conference for sure for the 2030 football season. I am saying this as a Notre Dame fan. I'd love to hear what conference you think that'll be, Joseph. Let us know
why.
What you think. And why.
And why do you say? Well, yeah, why are you saying for sure? Because every time everybody thought that Notre Dame would for sure have to do something, they have for sure not done anything. But hearing from a Notre Dame fan would be good.
Nathan Campbell, member. Moen, do you see any of the conferences getting a sponsorship deal? I think we've already heard about it. The All-State Big 12 Conference. That's pretty much a sponsorship deal right there.
Yeah, I think all of them are going to get sponsorship deals. It's a matter of like, what does that entail? It doesn't have to mean naming rights. It can mean Big Ten wide logo on field rights, right? Kind of deal that all the members agree to, or primary logo on the field, and each team can negotiate a secondary logo in a different section of the field. Like, those kind of things can happen.
GW asks, are you going to lay out your individual projections for each school tonight? Here's what I'll do. I don't agree with Greg that the SEC eats first, second, third, and fourth. I think North Carolina and Virginia are still in play for the Big Ten. I think the academic side would certainly prefer to be in the Big Ten over the SEC. They share a lot of the same academic fits. So I'm still saying those schools are up in the air. I know the SEC wants them very badly, but I'm putting them up in the air. They're my to be determined. I think ESPN gets Florida State and Clemson into the SEC. And I know that's just my personal belief, but I'm outnumbered here. We saw it in the poll. Overwhelmingly, people think the big is getting Florida State, but I see the SEC and ESPN working together as a defensive maneuver to prevent that at all costs. The last thing they want is the Big Ten in Tallahassee with one of the biggest brands in college football in Florida State. So I believe the ESPN and the SEC are going to work together to make sure that Florida State and Clemson land in the SEC as full partners right away. From there, I think, if the Big Ten is going to 24, you got to get in the Southeast. If you can't get North Carolina and Virginia, you probably grab Georgia Tech and Miami. The other option being Duke out there, Stanford and Cal in the West. And then Notre Dame would play in your East Coast Conference, or your East Coast Division, rather, and then you would either get Kansas or Texas A&M. What are your thoughts? Put them out there, lay them on the table.
Yeah, Florida State is the one that I keep going back and forth on. I still lean towards them going Big Ten, almost some sort of negotiating deal that Fox and ESPN sort of figure that out alongside their conference partners. And I probably thought less that kind of conversation would happen before they announced their joint venture, but now they have a go to prisons and not prison, but get sued, violate the law kind of zone to talk about things because they have a joint venture partnership that they could potentially discuss things. So, and I do think Clemson is more likely to go to the SEC. UNC, I still think, is going to the SEC as well. I'm less convinced about Virginia generally for multiple reasons. I wouldn't be surprised if they wound up in one of these two conferences, and I really wouldn't be surprised. We talk about who's the surprise or who's the cold pizza for the Big 12. The surprise of doesn't get anywhere to me might be they'll get somewhere. I don't mean that they won't, but Virginia might be one of those schools that doesn't land for multiple reasons in one of the two conferences they think of, and is part of being the standard bearer or flagship for the reconstituted ACC.
Good point. Chad Bracey brings up an excellent point here. No one knows much. We talk about how the Big and SEC want to slow this all down, and then Josh Pate drops the Jurassic Park Cup the next day.
That's fair. I don't necessarily think that it all changes. I could see that the slowdown, and I don't want to speak for Greg, but the slowdown could be slow down the chalk of who's going where, right? In that conversation, because maybe there's something else going on, and maybe if you're in a relationship with somebody you know super well, sometimes you have the same conversation, and you and your partner or family member could have interpreted the exact same conversation with the exact same facts slightly differently. Again, I don't know that happened. I'm not in those conversations that Greg, but since we're alluding to peek around the corner and slowing down and taking the odds down, and then the seeming contradiction to what Josh Pate said, I don't know that they're not necessarily contradiction. It could be, sure, they want that to happen, but if it doesn't happen, they're still going to react. Not everybody is in control of things the way that they want, right? There's different movements, there's different agendas and different motivations for people. And, Greg has said, well, if somehow Florida State and Clemson get out, and correct me if I'm wrong, Rowan, that those schools aren't necessarily going to be able to wait. If you're the Big Ten or the SEC, after what happened with the Alliance, are you trusting your new best friend to not do what's best for them when it's all said and done? I certainly wouldn't. I mean, Jim Phillips would, but you think those guys would be smart enough to learn from the past.
Right. And you got to remember, there's a joint advisory group. That's what you're leaning on. It's that joint advisory group, between Tony Petitti and Greg Sankey. We'll see how that goes. But I would not be sure. Here's the problem, guys. We're just two people who know college football, enjoy college football, are fans of college football. We're common people. We don't have inside sources. We just try and take from all the sources we do have that we know have legitimate information and put it out there and speculate. Have some water cooler talk. Have some fun with it. Get your guys' feedback on it. What do you guys think? Especially on Mowing After Dark. This is a fan show. We want to hear from you guys. What do you guys think? What do you think's happening? It's fun to speculate about, but I can totally get that people are getting burned out on it. So hopefully Josh Pate says you're going to see news stories breaking in the next 9 Saturdays. So hopefully this whole ACC drama is slowly coming to at least a part of the third act. At least, that's part of the story arc we can get to.
Yeah, I mean, the last few years at this time is when we go from the season to the postseason to, a lackluster signing day, but more like the portal now. Then I call it lying season, where we're all lying about how great our teams are going to be. But this has been the moment of the last several years where things have generally moved very fast. It's a little bit different this year because Florida State did their lawsuit and Clemson did their lawsuit. In past years, I wouldn't have spent way too much time as a hobby reading ACC conference bylaws on what 3/4 votes need to be and what needs to be 2/3 votes. But other than that, this is that time from USC, UCLA to Texas, Oklahoma. This is roughly around the time that those things happened, because people do want to lock up their business as best as possible before the season starts.
All right, we're at 180 viewers. We're about an hour in here, guys. We'll probably do another 15 to 20 minutes. If you want to, please give us a like. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe to us. Those things are free, cost you nothing, help us tremendously. If you want to feel, if you're feeling generous, like Ryan Thomas here, who left this super chat, P3 equals SC Cheese, Big Fridge, and Trailer 12 conferences. I don't know what you mean by the Trailer 12. You might have me a little messed up there, but if you want to do that, you can go to the little cash icon in the bottom of the chat window, leave a super chat. You can become a member, gain access to our members-only perks, including custom emojis in chat, access to our paywalled videos, including Wild Ute University, Timeline, and Moen Rants. And we'll have another one of those coming up probably tomorrow. And you can go that route too. Or if you feel magnanimous, you can gift a membership to someone else in the community using that same cash button option.
Yeah, and while we're mentioning the main channel page and the community section, one brief programming note and ask for everybody who's in here, because we won't capture them all as much during the live chat. If you haven't heard, we are scheduled to have Alonzo Highsmith on the Tuesday show. And for those of you who don't know, he was one of the guys on the original Miami Hurricanes national championship team under Schnellenberger and first round draft pick. But he then went on to be a senior personnel executive for the Browns, Packers, Seahawks. Came back to Miami for a couple of years as basically their head of football operations GM, and then recently in February left to go back to the NFL, reporting to the GM of the New England Patriots. And as much as it's a Miami contact I was able to get on, the reason we wanted to bring him on was to get somebody who's been in that position over the last couple of years, but has also been on multiple campuses as a scout, a senior personnel executive for draft and making decisions on those lines, but has seen NIL and what happens on draft decisions and suggestions and the professionalization of the sport. So a lot of the things that we talk about, just like what do you think about the state of college football? So on the community tab, as well as on Twitter, there's a post on the community tab about that and asking for any questions you guys might have for that. It doesn't have to be Miami. I would expect more about NIL and how things like that are working and all of that sort of world of college football that has changed that brought us to this place. So please give us some questions that you guys might have, because probably the best questions we ever get are from you guys, not just us knuckleheads on the screen.
Yep. Dan Miter says, Moen agree with the demise of the ugly brown trees at Oregon. Smurf turf at Boise should be next. I am probably in the old school. I believe all turf should be green. I hate blue. I hate red. I hate gray turf. It's green turf for football, guys.
I don't mind the Boise having the blue turf, except for when you had to go to if you ever went to a bowl game there. Like watching them on there was interesting as like a diversion. Playing on it as your team is hard.
Yeah, there's one of them that has a gray field. I think maybe it's Eastern Washington, or I'm thinking it's one of those teams. It's gray. It's like watching an old movie, and it's been like colorized because you just see this stark contrast with the gray field and colorful players. Chad Bracey says it comes down to which state can offer more out-of-state tuition to other schools in your conference. Florida has a literal ton of high school kids looking to go to college. Great point.
The thing is, if you and sometimes his charts are a little bit off, but if you look at most of the schools in what are now the P4, even though there's this cliff coming for students generally, the schools that are in the P4 are well above the average, application rate. Like they're probably the last ones that are going to be impacted by any of the decline in student enrollment. So I get that take, but I'm not buying into that as, yes, you want to be involved in the bigger states for sure, like a future growth, but I don't think it's an imminent challenge for these schools as much as it's going to be for a lot of other smaller schools in all divisions, even those that don't play sports, which has already started to happen.
Blue Notes basketball, 365. However, Notre Dame, Duke, other leftovers are going to have to cut bait or swim. Notre Dame will remain Indian football and their Hoop Olympic sports in the Big East. Duke, Syracuse, possibly Pitt, Wake Forest, also Big East.
So are you saying that all of those other schools are going to get the Big East to reinstate football, or they're going to go independent in football?
They would have to reinstate football at that point. There's no way they couldn't, unless those schools gave up their football programs, which I can't see Syracuse, or definitely Pitt would not do.
Right. For sure, those two. Jim Brown School is not giving up. It's not giving up football.
Yeah. Porter Osborne Jr. says too many charter members of the SEC, Florida, Auburn, and Georgia would keep Florida State out. I hear exactly where you're coming from. My counterpoint to that, Porter, would be, do they want to let the Big Ten in there to the recruiting grounds? Do they want to let Ohio State, Michigan, USC, Penn State have a foothold in Tallahassee, get them into the breadbasket of Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, Florida?
Yeah, if you're the SEC, I think it's a bad business decision to have potentially, not saying it's this is what's going to happen, but to have 2 of the 3 primary D1 college football programs in the state in another, the biggest state in your profile outside of Texas, and growing, have 2 of the 3 schools in that state not in your conference and potentially in one.
Clay Johansson says, I bartend and my snowbirds start leaving September till November. Where do you live at, Clay? Are you in Arizona, Florida? Let me know where your snowbirds are at. Nunn says, Almighty Finn, I'd be great to see Miami on Big Ten and playing my Wolverines.
Yes, one of my favorite memories is a massive comeback of Miami against Michigan a long time ago, and somebody taking a massive dive off of the platform board at the pool did not land well for him down in Miami as we all rushed out of a club there. So,
okay, I thought that was something that actually happened in the game. I was like, wow.
No, it was everybody was in a bar when this comeback came back in the 4th quarter, and people went nuts and ran into the pool, and some fool who's drunk did not do an Olympic winning dive off of the whatever meter platform board.
I was in Morgantown one time in a hotel when West Virginia was playing Miami. I forget what year it was, probably in the mid 90s. And West Virginia had upset Miami. And it was absolute pandemonium there in Morgantown.
Yeah, there's nothing like being on a college campus when the school that does either a massive comeback or upsets a rival at home that they weren't expecting. I mean,
yeah,
there's nothing like it. And even if you're on the downside of that, you can hate it, but you can appreciate the excitement that school can have.
Chad Bracey says Virginia deserves to be stuck in the ACC due to the president.
Well, yes, but what does anybody expect the current, lead person from any of the member institutions on the ACC to say or do publicly right now, other than be massively political? It also theoretically means nothing. It's what they have to do. It's what you would expect them to do. It may mean that they don't have a home or don't want to go to another school and want tobacco road to rule, but it could mean nothing the day after it needs to.
Chad Bracey says yes. In regards to, are you both 100% on Ville eventually in the Big 12? I think so. I think Louisville to the Big 12 is probably one of the best locks in realignment.
Yeah, I mean, that just, other than a couple of people that have been tagged on in an ongoing death threat on Twitter about this topic, most Louisville fans seem to be relatively understanding of that situation. It's a great fit for the Big 12. Like, whether you're a Louisville fan and like that outcome, I can understand one way or the other. But for the Big 12, it's a great school for them.
Sam8911SK, SEC goal is to get flagship of every Southern school. Note Florida State is co-flagship in Florida. I mean, it's hard to argue with that statement.
Yeah, each school has looked a little bit differently in terms of co-flagship. Even when there's a co-flagship, Florida's been there for a longer thing, so it's more has more of the research, has more of that time to have built all that stuff. But Florida State has rocketed up the academic rankings over the last decade.
Movie Time Blue says there's a chance Big Ten gets a big fat 0. The 4-letter is that vindictive. I don't think that the ESPN can afford to add 6 to 8 teams to the SEC.
Yeah, I don't see that happening. It's not the worst thing that would happen in the world. If it did happen, it would be a pretty fantastic conference. So I mean, it would just be a celebrity death match, though. Don't expect a lot of undefeateds. Think definitely more NFL zone if that all builds out that way.
Yeah, that would definitely be a slog on your players too, having to play. Lots of wear and tear would be put on them in a season like that. But yeah, I don't think the SEC is looking to get 6 to 8. So even if they get Florida State, Clemson, Virginia, North Carolina, I think the Big Ten would be just as happy having Miami and Notre Dame. I think they would be ecstatic with that pair because they know exactly how much money they're going to make. Nathan Campbell says, Moen, do you think the bottom feeders of the Big Ten may end up in the Big 12? No, I don't believe anybody in the Big Ten is leaving anywhere. I don't believe in relegation.
So you don't buy into that the Illini's AD interview the other day of potential future fear of being below a cut line?
I think he put that out there in particular to try and get boosters and everybody else to realize they need to come on board. They need to do this. They need help.
Yep.
I think that's entirely why that was out there.
Well, that's a perfect example, right, of what are people really saying?
Yeah.
They're saying words, but what are they really trying to do? It's possible, SEC, we don't want to expand. Well, maybe they don't want to expand. That could be true. Doesn't mean they won't expand. It also could mean they don't want to make it seem like they're thirsty to expand because it's harder on your negotiating position. You want to come from as much indifference as possible, right, to not cause yourself to have to give up more than you need to, even if ultimately you get to a place that you're outwashed on the negotiations.
Okay, here's a good question. Who has a better season this year, USC or Nebraska?
USC.
I am also going to say USC.
He knows. I don't think that he's necessarily on the hot seat here in USC land, but the offense has never been the issue, and it probably won't be the issue this year. And they did do some really good hires and moves on the defensive side. So I think they're going to be a top 5 defense in the Big Ten? No, but they're probably not going to be a bottom 5, and that might be enough to help them, have a fairly good first year in the conference.
Chad Bracey says Disney owns Fox and ESPN. There's no escaping the evil mouse. This is incorrect. The Fox network is separate from Disney. The only thing that Disney got in the purchase was the Fox Studios, 20th Century Fox.
Correct. The TV studios and the film studios and their libraries is what Fox got sold off to Disney. Fox News is not part of Disney. The Fox network is definitely not part of Disney. That would never have actually passed multiple federal agencies because of what Disney has on other cable channels and properties. And it's not dissimilar to other things. Like Universal Studios does not own Universal Music, even though at one time they did. They both have the name.
Mr. Ed Wayner says Eastern Washington has a red field. Somebody has a gray field out there. Or I had a flashback. Take your pick.
Can't recall.
Yeah. Sean, could you guys see a scenario where the ACC negotiates a deal where these teams stay until like 2028 or any date and they can leave freely? Well, listen, if ESPN drops that extension, they can stay till 2027 and then they're free to go. Or they could try and negotiate out for an exit fee and only 2 years of a gore. So that's my theory. That's what I think is going to happen ultimately is that ESPN sees all the instability caused by Florida State and Clemson, and probably at some point somebody else is going to have to jump in here, whether it's Miami, whether it's North Carolina, and ESPN's just going to go, you know what? It's better that we just control this demolition. We let these teams go. That way we can move them into the SEC as quickly as we can and wash our hands of the ACC.
Yeah, before we even knew about the look-in or opt-out clause, before that conversation happened, I was always of the mindset, just from whatever I was reading and just an opinion as valid as anybody else's who's looked into it, that a lot of this was going to go down in 2027. That just seemed the time frame, and with some magic, maybe 2026. That issue, maybe it accelerates it, maybe the lawsuits accelerate it, but I don't really see 2028 as the year on the horizon for anyone in that regard. Like, I think if you don't get, you're more likely to wait 2 years, I think, ultimately, when all those contracts are up, if you're waiting until 2028.
Daniel Gygax, Eastern Michigan has the gray field. Eastern Washington is red. So there you go. It wasn't a flashback. Or it might have been a flashback, and I might have watched a game there. Who knows? Could have been a little bit from column A, a little from column B. Sam says Florida State got 3 of the top 25 players from Georgia last year. Florida State recruits Georgia already. You're absolutely right. And if Florida State was a Big Ten team, you would also have Ohio State down there. When Ohio State plays Florida State at Doak Walker, they would have the recruits there that they were trying to recruit on the sidelines watching the game. So I don't think ESPN or the SEC wants that.
Yeah, the Big Ten, Ohio State aside, probably underperforms overall in getting some of the premier talent in Florida specifically. There's plenty of talent in Florida, including 3 stars that are filling up the rosters at all of those schools. So I don't mean they're not recruiting in Florida, but I think that not having a member in that conference in the state does impact others who aren't as prolific in recruiting as Ohio State is.
Clay Johansson says he bartends in Michigan, but they go to Florida and Arizona starting in September through November. And living in the Midwest, I can't blame him. Chad Bracey, this will probably be our final comment, guys. If there's anything else you guys want to absolutely get read, it'll have to be a super chat. We've been on the air for an hour and 20 minutes here. We can go maybe 5 minutes longer. I see you got some starred comments in here I do want to get to. Miami and UNC are both AAU, both Virgin Territory for Big. We hear a ton of drooling over UNC. But how is Miami any different for the Big? Bigger, faster growing state and better, more historic football. It's the research dollars. University of North Carolina, I believe, is number 4 in research dollars. If you added them to the Big Ten, that would put Washington, Wisconsin, Michigan, UNC, and UCLA. I think that's top 5 of the top 6.
Yeah, it's crazy numbers. And then even, when you get down to the lower ranks of what that lineup is, I think Miami's projected to be over 500 million next year. I think it's in the 400s right now. So you're still talking pretty massive amounts of research for the relative sizes of all the universities in that conference, if that were to come to pass there. Florida State's really raising their stuff up too if they wind up joining. And then whatever that bump is from being part of the Big Ten, whatever that means, if that means expect 20% over 5 years. And I know Nebraska hasn't really seen it, but I don't know if that's situational and not, indicative of what would happen for others.
Daniel Gygax, it might have been the 1993 West Virginia-Miami game. All I know is I was in a hotel on like the 6th or 7th floor, and there was a bar across the parking lot from the hotel. And you could hear it from the 7th, from up high, people partying down there when that game was over. It was a night game. They were partying, I think, until 3 or 4 in the morning, until eventually they ran out of liquor, I think. So, but it was a hell of a night trying to sleep. But it was fun watching people from the window. Yes, this is from Jamie Thornton. ESPN is a business. ESPN isn't a charity. The ACC network makes a lot of money from those carriage fees based on all these fans that tune in. If Florida State, Clemson, North Carolina, Miami are gone, how many fans are watching?
It's good. That's you've seen Utes numbers, right? Where basically, I think between the 3 schools, it's like 44 or 45% of all of the audience is Florida State, Clemson, Miami. I believe that this coming season, unless any of those schools has a down year, which I don't really expect, that could approach 50% based off of the schedule and the early season rankings, but obviously you got to do that on the field, and it doesn't matter if you are highly ranked in the beginning of the year and you blow 3 games, or you fail to take a knee and blow a game that way. So there's a lot of audience that's going. Granted, some of that's when they play each other, but those are the numbers, and Louisville is the 4th one that easily puts you over the 50% total audiences wrapped up in 4 schools, at least over the trend line.
Jamie Thornton follows that up with, well, the numbers go way down and the ACC network doesn't make a profit long term anymore. ESPN isn't going to keep the ACC going as it is today with those schools going. All right, guys. I will say let's get some comments out of the way here at the end of the show. If you've been watching, I don't think we've dipped below 130, 140 tonight.
Yeah, we're at 175 right now, if I'm not mistaken. So that's awesome. Thank you.
Awesome viewership. If you guys are watching, give us a like, give us a subscribe. Those are free. Doesn't cost you anything. We promise not to bother you. Programming notes tomorrow at 8 p.m. Big West Mafia show with Sergeant Pickles and Becky Go Huskies talking about West Coast football, in particular the 4 new schools in the Big Ten. Tuesday at 8 p.m. special guest Alonzo Highsmith. Put it on your calendars, people. Go to the community tab on our YouTube page. Leave us a question to ask Mr. Highsmith. We will refer to him as Mr. Highsmith. We will not call him Alonzo. So leave a message for us there. Leave with your question. And other than that, any other programming notes that we have?
No, just been an awesome weekend for the College Football Mafia channel and everyone who's been coming on. So the more that you guys engage with the show here, it helps. And if you have more comments that we missed during the show, please just go back into the on-demand version and add them, because we are checking them. I know Moen definitely is. And it also helps the channel grow as well.
Who is Doak Walker? Where is Doak Walker Stadium? He's right. It's Doak Campbell, not Doak Walker. Where am I getting Doak Walker from?
Isn't there some award?
Yeah, I think there's an award, a Doak I award. I don't know.
Maybe they were cousins.
Maybe there isn't, and it's another flashback. Who knows? College.
Well, that's why you come to Moen After Dark, right? It's because you never know what you're going to get. And
college
that's why
was a real weird time for me, guys. So.
And that's why Moen does his What If series.
Yeah. What If? What If is copyrighted. It's called Timeline. Don't get me in trouble with Disney. I can't afford it, guys. So thanks, everybody, for watching. We appreciate everybody coming in and joining our discussion tonight. We will see you guys next Sunday. Don't forget, Tuesday at 8 p.m., very special guest, Alonzo Highsmith, on the Big 12 Mafia show, only here on the College Football Mafia Network. Have anything else you got to say, Rock and Rant?
No, I think everyone's probably tired of hearing me babble. So we will catch up with everyone. Tune into those guys tomorrow night on with Pickles and Becky.
All right. Thank you so much, guys. We appreciate you. Best community on YouTube. Thanks for sticking around and watching us. Take care.